Hi, I'm Brian, and I'm struggling with code interviews. Are you struggling too? I don't have the solution for you, but I do want to kind of show the struggles that I'm going through. Some people are great at thinking on their feet. Others are not. But even if you're not great thinking on your feet, that doesn't mean you can't be perfectly effective as a software engineer. My most recent coding interview, which I'm going to simulate here, was actually a pretty good one in terms of the question. A lot of coding interviews have these LeetCode style questions. There's some kind of trick that you need to know. This is what I remember from the coding interview. Your manager asks you to make a web server with the following API. Make sure it is optimized. So right off the bat, we know that we have to be careful to not read extra data or write extra data, right? Then it says that the API needs to have the following endpoints. One of them is to get all messages, and that must be paginated. The other one is that you should be able to put a message into it. And the third one is you should be able to get a specific message. And the last one, there was something that I forgot. Now, the actual contents of this file, when I got it, had more text. When I read through the requirements, I did miss some things because I felt this intense time pressure. The first thing I missed was the necessity for it to be paginated. The second thing that I really kind of hung myself up on was I was thinking of this too much as a real world scenario. I started going through this coding interview. I looked at it and I thought, okay, well, getting all messages should be easy. Write a message to it. That's not going to be a problem. Get a specific message. Okay, well, that could be tricky. So I started writing. I thought, okay, we'll write a message. All right, so let's just do, I don't know, def write message. And let's pass in the message. Simple enough, right? And we're going to want to have a file that we're going to open, right? So let's do, and we want to use a with so that it auto closes. So with, I believe it's open, or it might be lowercase. I don't remember because at work I was writing Java. And when I try to do Java for code interviews, it's so verbose, and I'm used to using my IDE, which does a lot of code completions for me. And when you do these coding interviews, you don't get to use the tools that you're accustomed to. So we'll do with open file. Let's just call this messages.txt. And I believe we want to open this in append mode. So something like that. Oops. As all right, so now we have the messages file. So if we wanted to write that message, I believe we would just do something like messages file.write or something like that, or write line, or I don't remember exactly. He wasn't so concerned with the code working so much as the actual concept behind it. So that was good. I kind of just did pseudocode-ish stuff. I said, okay, let's write the message then into that file. But now we have this file that could have many messages, but we don't have a way of getting a specific message. The thing that was tripping me up was this optimization. So the goal here is that you don't want to read all these lines up to the line that you want. So let's say that you're trying to get message 20. You can't open the file and go read line 20 times to get to the 20th line and then return that, because the higher the message number, the longer it's going to take. It's, I guess, I'm bad with this big O notation, but like an O of n or something. It just, each time it gets longer and longer and longer. It gets progressively worse at the same rate. So that is not an option. What could I do? Then I thought of a scheme where you basically put on each line the number of the message first with some kind of delimiter, and then you go ahead and try to find it. He wanted to help me a little bit, and he said, you can just create a global variable and store it there. And I said, oh, okay. But that, that wouldn't really work in the real world because of, web server is traditionally stateless. And he said, well, this is a coding interview and it doesn't have to be ultimately super realistic, right? So I said, okay, well, let me kind of just start with this idea of keeping the line number. So I did something like a global last line equals, or last message, let's say. And I thought, okay, so when I go to write a message, I can just increment the last message, right? And this would have issues, of course, with the concurrency, but he had already told me that at this point, it's not supposed to be a very realistic example. So there's like no lock or anything here. Like this is not real code. I thought, okay, well, let me just do like a last message plus equals 1, right? So now that the first one will actually be message number 1 because we started at 0. When I write this, let's do like a format string here. And what we'll do is we'll do, and let's change the last message to last message number. Last message number, and then our delimiter, and then the message. And I said, okay, so now I've done that, but this isn't great, right? Because now I still can't get to the exact message that I need for this get a specific message. Like, I mean, I can start writing it. It says like, get specific message. And I didn't like my naming either because naming is very important in programs, but this had to be fast. So I just tried. And so I can, copy this code over here, but we don't want it to be in append mode. We really want it to be like a read-only mode, which I think is R. So great. So now what do we do? You would have to be able to actually seek in the file to where you need to be. I didn't remember the exact Python API for it, but the interviewer let me open up a page that had the information for seek. So seek says that it needs to have an offset in order to seek to it. I thought, okay, well, offset, that's tricky because I don't know exactly where in the file that line is going to be. I also know that not all lines are going to be the same length. So I was getting kind of hung up. So I said, okay, well, now if I do this thing that I was thinking of, I would have to seek somewhere, right? And I have to figure out some kind of length. I don't have a way of knowing how long each line is. I could make each line a certain length, but that gets a bit tricky because, first of all, it's not optimized, and this thing said it had to be optimized. So it might be optimized for reading, but it's not optimized for write speed or even file size. I told him, I could possibly pad it with zeros and then like use some kind of very efficient compression that eliminates at least the 0 runs so that that doesn't actually add any more space. I'd probably have to limit it to ASCII, which wouldn't be great because UTF-8 can have variable sizes for different characters. So I didn't have a great way forward here. I told him the only thing I can think of, and I once again prefaced with this is a horrible idea, is that I could kind of make some kind of guess, then find where I am, and then try to kind of bounce around and find it, right? And if I'm too far down, I need to go back up. If I'm too far up, and I can maybe kind of tweak that parameter, but that's not really going to be efficient. I would eventually get there, but it's kind of ugly. It involves some parsing, which is not the greatest thing to do. And what I was forgetting this entire time is that this is not real world, and I can have these global variables. So he said, okay, well, I'll give you a hint here. Why don't you store the offsets in a global variable? And I said, oh, that's a good idea. Okay, so let's do something like a global message offsets. And why don't we make it a list, right? So we'll just have a list of the offsets. That way, like you can use the index of it to know which message is starting at which offset. You do have to be careful because the indexes start at 0 and the messages will start at 1. I have to make sure not to be off by 1. Then I needed to make sure that I could get where the file is when it was first opened to write a message. Because he also kind of gave me a hint that you need to look in this write message area because that's where you know where it is. So he's kind of hand feeding this to me. At this point, I'm still really struggling. I'm a bit flustered. I'm just not doing so well. So we don't need the last message number, right? But before we actually write the message, we need to get the offset. The offset's basically where in the file it is. I'm supposing maybe I could just use the length of the file as the offset. I don't really know. So what I do is I think, okay, so when we're going to write something, we can do message offsets. And then we did, I believe with a list, it's append. And then I need to get the offset. And I thought, okay, well, it's probably something like, let's get the length of the messages file. And I don't know if this is correct, but that's what I was thinking. And I told him one of the issues that can happen here is that because these are two separate operations, we could get out of sync, right? We could have a scenario where we go to write the message and then we record the offset, but we actually never record the message. That's not great, but let's go with it right now because we were running out of time and I had to get it done. I went over to getting a specific message. So now we know the message number that we have to get. So we had to go and write that code. And I asked him, do I need to worry about, let's say if somebody puts in a 0 or a negative number, do I need to worry about, like kind of something not being in the index right now? And he said, just don't worry about it. I said, okay. So I didn't worry about it. And I said, all right, so let's go ahead then, and we're going to have to seek. So we're going to do the messages file and .seek. Then we need to get the offset of the one that we're looking at. So it's a message offsets. And then we have to do the whatever the message number is -1, because our messages will start at 1, but this index or this list will start at 0. The list index will start at 0. All right, cool. So now I should be able to read line. So we'll do, here we can just return the message, this file dot read line, I believe. And that's it. Cool. All right, so now we have something here. But now we need to do the pagination. So I told him, okay, well, with the pagination, I should probably have some kind of data structure that I return. I should probably return something kind of like, let's see, something like a current page total pages and something like the current messages that the messages for that page. So messages, and we'll have the messages. And then I told him, so we'll probably want to get we'll probably want to be able to get all messages paginated. We basically want to say like, so maybe the number of messages per page, right? And then maybe the page number, let's say, something like that. And then I ran out of time. So then I kind of, and this might have been a mistake, but I kind of gave a retrospective of where I had some issues. He had a good point. I could have stored an index file, right, as another file. And in that file, I could have, in some kind of structured format, the numbers and their offsets. That's a very good point. But I have to say, I have a lot of respect for this interviewer. He was very good throughout the whole entire interview. He was helpful. I probably should have asked some more questions initially, or asked for help earlier rather than struggling on. I just felt that I was supposed to show that I could come up with a solution on my own, which I couldn't. But I kind of knew that I was stuck, and I think I needed to explicitly ask for help, even though I was kind of alluding to asking for help. But I do appreciate that this question was a lot more real world than a lot of the other questions I've gotten. It was much better than, let's say, implement the bubble sort algorithm, or you have a staircase of n number of stairs, and you can go up the stairs in combination of 1 step at a time, 2 steps at a time, 3 steps at a time, up to n steps at a time. What's the total number of combinations that you can go up the stairs? Hopefully you find this video helpful, maybe slightly entertaining, I don't know. Maybe it helps that you see that others are having the same problems that you're having. It's not you, it's the process. And I suppose that studying for the process might help get you closer to where you need to be. But that comes at a cost of doing other things like learning new technologies or creating videos or creating an app or whatever other cool thing you want to do. So that's a bit frustrating, but we'll all get there at some point, right?